Lovely.
Thank you.
So how lovely that we get to learn together, particularly about faith and spirituality, which is so many ways the theme of Lag BaOmer and of Shimon Bar Yochai, who we remember at this time, the father of the Zohar, who was known for his deep faith, just as we look to Heschel to think about what faith means. I do want to acknowledge the news that some of us may have just seen popping across our screens in Israel of the stampede in the celebration of Lag BaOmer, where so many have already lost their lives. And I know all of us are praying for health and recovery for that community. Tonight, I'm going to go ahead and share a presentation to begin with, to walk us through a little bit of what was in chapter 15. Because if you're like me, then maybe you love reading Heschel in that you read it and get down the page and can't remember anything that just happened, right? Because there's all those beautiful words and phrases, but it takes like 3 or 4 reads to get to the ideas. That's at least how I experience Heschel. Gorgeous and takes a few reads. So I'm going to try to break down the themes of what he was talking about in the chapter, and then we'll get some time to talk in smaller groups. Let me see if I can share my slides with you. Okay. Okay, does that work? Can everybody see?
Yep, it's perfect.
Perfect, great, okay. So we are looking at God in Search of Man by Abraham Joshua Heschel. And last time we talked a little bit about the idea of radical amazement. In chapter 15, Rabbi Heschel really takes us into the topic of faith. What is faith? How do we understand faith? Does faith just happen in a moment, or is it built over time? And I know for a lot of us, faith is a challenging journey. It doesn't all come together in one neat piece, and there's so many questions that we have. So Heschel describes to us what he thinks are the components of faith. He begins by saying, he calls the first section, no faith at first sight. No faith at first sight. Just like we would have no love at first sight, there's no faith at first sight. Which really, I think I'm paraphrasing here to mean faith is a lifelong process. We don't just experience some grandeur and suddenly, woof, we have faith forever. Rather, it's a process, a journey that builds over the course of our lives. And I lifted up some of the quotes that I thought were most evocative of what Heschel meant by this. No faith at first sight. He says, a faith that comes into being like a butterfly is ephemeral. What does he mean by that? I think he means if we have the experience of faith that just dawns on us, we see a beautiful sunset. We have that moment when we're holding a child. Faith in God comes over us in an instant. It might also fade in an instant, right? He who is swift to believe is swift to forget. If it just comes on all of a sudden, that's sacred and beautiful and shouldn't be taken for granted. And it might fade just as quickly. Heschel believes that faith is preceded by awe. That's why we talked first with Rabbi Siegel the last time about awe, about radical amazement. We have the act of feeling awe and grandeur, and that builds into a journey of faith, which is not a one-time feeling, but a commitment and a process that builds over time from the initial experience of awe. And he says, all the days of our lives, we must continue to deepen our sense of mystery. Callousness to the mystery is our greatest obstacle. It's that last line that I find most compelling. Callousness to the mystery is our greatest obstacle. We have to find a way to notice that which makes no sense, that which can't be explained, and to allow that sense of mystery to build. So even though the experience of suddenly seeing a sunset and having faith isn't really how things work, it is true that if we see that beautiful, breathtaking sunset, and we allow it to seep into us with awe, and we don't look it by, we don't look at our phones and we don't ignore it, and we actually lean into that feeling and name it as being beyond words, beyond explanation, then maybe it will be the inception of a faith journey. Heschel here in this section quoted Rambam. He said here, according to Rambam, Davar Yadua Uvaror, it's well known and evident that the love of God cannot strike deep root in the heart of the human unless it occupies the mind constantly, so that nothing in the world matters but the love of God. Nothing matters but the love of God. What's he saying? He's saying that faith strikes root, grows, is nurtured when we allow it to take space in us. When we allow it to not be fleeting and small, but huge and fulfilling and the thing that drives us, which is a rather daunting task, we might think. But for Heschel, this is faith. It's not the first date. It's the long-term marriage and commitment that builds over time, that has waves and ups and downs, and that has to be committed to again and again and again and again. That's faith for Heschel. Stage one. In the second part of the chapter, Heschel talks about attachment. He says faith is attachment. And I think what he means by that, his words, faith is attachment, my words, faith is demanding. It's not simple. You can't just enter in. He says faith is not the same as belief, which in of itself is such a big thought. It's not the same as belief. And he gives an example here where he says, if I see something before my eyes, like let's say the children of Israel saw the Red Sea part, I believe that it happened. But does it actually build my faith in the long run? In their case, not so, right? There's griping, going back to wanting to go back to Egypt, worrying, building the golden calf. Even though there's belief in the moment, the faith that builds is more demanding than a simple momentary belief. Which is why Heschel says faith is an act of the whole person, of mind and will and heart. It requires every piece of us, the spiritual, to all come together. Faith is not achieved at once, but an attitude we can gain or lose. And I don't know about you, but that resonates with me. And I have a deep and abiding faith in God that has guided me throughout my life, and it can be gained and lost. It's waxed and waned, for sure. There's moments where I felt proximity, moments where I felt less strong in that faith. It can be lost if I don't work on it, if I don't create room for it, if I don't cultivate it. It's a demanding process. It isn't just there. I have to put into it. And here, the story that Heschel wove is the one I referenced before. He is using as the anchor for this understanding as faith as attachment, the idea of having seen the wonders of Egypt and yet not built our faith. He says, you have seen, that's belief. You saw all that the Lord did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all his land, the great trials which your eyes saw, the signs and wonders. But to this day, God has not given you a mind to understand, eyes to see, or ears to hear. What does that mean? You saw the wonders in Egypt. Your eyes saw the wonders. For Heschel, that's belief in that moment. But you haven't come to understand with eyes that see. You're not really seeing. You're seeing, but you're not seeing. You're seeing as in belief, but you're not seeing as in faith. You haven't translated that singular moment into a deeper, connective, lasting, process of faith. Faith is demanding. It doesn't happen in a moment. The next point Heschel makes is he calls the embarrassment of faith. Faith is a painful journey. Tragic is the embarrassment of the man of faith. What does he mean? He means that as a person of faith, the truth is it's hard. And we have moments that are full of tears and angst. Moments when we look out at the world and think, God, if you're there, then I must look like a fool because my life is awful. So where are you? That's part of the embarrassment of faith. Or, God, I really want to believe in you. I'm trying everything. And God, it's hard. I don't know where you are. How have you disappeared? Have you just left me? This is the embarrassment of faith, because just because we have faith doesn't mean our life is actually easy or good. That's not how God works. But people think it will. And so there's this pain in that moment. And these are some of the quotes he brings, right, which I tried to lift up from us, from the Torah, that he's trying to hold on to. God, why have you forsaken me? As in, I believe, and yet you've left me. My tears have been food at night, and they say to me, where is your God? Right? I'm sobbing and crying, and people know me as a person of faith, and yet my life is so awful that people will think you've abandoned me. The embarrassment of faith. Faith is painful. It's not quick. It doesn't fix our problems. How long will you hide yourself? And the piece from Isaiah, which is the piece here that Heschel anchors on, is here. Why do you make us err from your ways so that we fear not? Which is an interesting translation. This is how Heschel translated it. So that we, it says, so that we fear not. When the text might say, why do you make us err from your path, right? And then you could continue, why do you make us not fear you? But that's not how he reads it. He reads it as the fact that we err leads us to not have faith. As if, God, there's so much that's going on in our lives that's so hard, and those tribulations make it even harder to believe in you. Faith is a painful journey. So many people of faith might say, if only I believe good things will happen to me. The world is not so simple. Painful things happen to all of us, faithful or otherwise. And so there's pain in the journey. And he says this, there must be a profound reason for man's supreme misery. The reason perhaps is that God and God's relation to us follows not only the path of compassion, but also the path of justice. And that God's compassion is concealed by God's justice, just as God's justice is concealed by God's compassion. Now, I don't know if I agree or you agree with the explanation. That's for your small groups to have a conversation here. And he's noting that faith can be miserable, that it might be miserable. We might be in pain, in spiritual pain and emotional pain as we go through our journey with God, wishing that God were closer, wishing we felt God more, wishing God would take away our pain, and not always having that. It's not a quid pro quo. That's not how it works. And maybe, he says, those moments is when God's compassion of Din overwhelms God's rachamim, and God's stricture overwhelms God's heart, God's compassion. And maybe that's simply what's happening there. The final portion of chapter 15 is where Heschel says, faith includes faithfulness. I read this part like 3 or 4 times to try to get it. I think what he means is God is concealed. Looking for God as if faith will come because it's obvious, because it's right out there in that moment of awe and grandeur. Sometimes it's like that, but more often we have those moments of grandeur and then lots of moments in between where truthfully we can't see or hear or find God. And those moments of masking or hiding are so painful. Buber differently would call that the eclipse of God, right? And the notion that if we're in a relationship with God, because Buber is an existentialist, that as if the moon it's eclipsed. Our relationship is absent. And in that concealment, in that eclipse, we long for God but can't find God. Buber says all relationships work that way. And Heschel, in a way, agrees. Faith includes faithfulness, a strength of waiting, the acceptance of God's concealment, defiance of history. There are moments in history where God seems concealed, and moments in our own lives where God is concealed. And faith includes the ability to wade through those waters of hiddenness and to find a way to keep streaming forward, even though we can't see or feel God in that particular moment. The example here he gives us from Job, where Job says, God goes by me and I don't see God. God passes also, but I don't perceive God, right? Often we might feel like that. That's the moment of faith, is saying, it's not that I think that God isn't here. It's that in a particular moment of my life, I have moments where even though I might have faith that God is, I don't have proof. And God is concealed and hard for me to grasp. The section concludes with this quote that I want to anchor us on. The words, I am a stranger on earth, from Psalm 119, were interpreted in Midrash to refer to God. It's a great Midrash, right? Because that's probably not what the psalmist meant. I am a stranger on earth probably refers to the human being. But in this case, it's God who's a stranger on earth, as in God, the Shekhinah, in exile on earth, God lost from God's self. God is a stranger in the world. And our task is to bring God back into the world, into our lives. That faith in God is to reveal what is concealed. God is a stranger. God is lost, man in search of God, right? God is lost. God is hidden. God is concealed. And it's our job to find God and reveal God, because often the journey is not so obvious. Now, that's a lot to take in as we're all drinking in all of these concepts and ideas about what is faith. And I didn't say earlier, I do want to thank Greg Silver, who is here tonight, for spurring this conversation. Greg, I've gotten to have conversations with you more than once about our own faith journeys and the way that they build and the way that Heschel gives language to that which we often feel internally. And I'm grateful to you for the opportunity to be here tonight in bringing all of this to light to all of us. And so our goal in section 2 here of our class is to offer you an opportunity to enter into a small group, to take in these ideas and to think about it together. And we're going to do it with some different technology than we've used before tonight. So Amy and I are excited to share this with you. We're excited, right?
We're excited. So just so everybody knows, there will be 4 breakout rooms. You can see the assignments as to which rabbi is in which room. In a second, you're going to see that you are going to be invited to go into one of these rooms. I'm going to do it right now. They will be opened. So what you will be doing is picking which room you wish to go into. If you do not see or you have trouble getting into a room, just let me know, unmute yourself, and I will put you in the room that you wish to go into. But you should, at this point, see the rooms and feel free to find a room appropriate for your choice of study.
You can see me doing that on the screen. I'm going to go to room 3. So I'm going to go here to room 3 and I'm going to click join and I'll be there. We'll spend about 20 minutes answering some questions about these themes and then come on back.
Rabbi Siegel, you are in room 1, so please go into room 1.
Okay, I'm here.
Liz Berkey, you're going into room 2.
Well, how do we choose the room?
There should be a thing that says join next to the room. If not, hover over, if you have an older Zoom, it should, if you hover your mouse over the number of the room, it should let you go into one. If you have trouble, just tell me and I will put you in one.
I see you, but I don't see any room.
I can't see a room.
I have no choice.
If you put
There's
me
no
in-
room.
There are no rooms here.
No.
We don't see
No,
any
no
rooms
rooms
either.
are showing
But
you.
the hovering doesn't work.
Okay, so let me, I will then assign you, so please hang on there, please.
Amy, would you put me in room 1, please?
Yes, Rabbi. The best laid plans.
Oh, I got it. I figured it out.
Oh, okay.
Join. Oh, I got it.
All right, if not, I'm gonna start assigning you to go into a room, make it
Okay.
easy.
Can I go into 3?
Yes, Laura, I'll put you into 3.
Okay.
If anybody else has a specific request, please let me know.
We
Or
don't.
which is,
No room.
okay, Neil, tell me what room.
3,
Neil wants to go into
4.
3.
Oh,
Who said 4? Neil
Neil.
Rosenberg?
Right.
Okay, okay.
Schwartz is 3. Hi,
Schwartz
Neil.
is- Schwartz is 3. Other people have a request?
Brown is 4.
Sydney 4.
Hold on.
We don't know
Then-
what room is what.
Rabbi Siegel is 1. Liz Berkey is 2. Dror is 3. Russo is 4.
How do you get to the room?
I'm gonna put you in.
Putting you in.
Nikolai, I'm putting you in 2.
What about Russo?
We'll do it the old fashioned way. Is there anybody else has a room request to go into? Just unmute yourself and I'll put you in.
I'll go into 1.
Joy, is that you?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna put you in room 1.
Let's go to
Judith Horwich, which room would you like to go into?
4.
Rabbi 4, okay. Edie Kessler, tell me what room, Gail Golden,
Avi Porat, what room?
Avi Parat. What room would you like to go into, Avi?
Michael's home.
Michael's room, give me 1 minute. Okay, Barbara, Arnie, what room do you want to go into? Barbara Brown, what room?
4, please.
Okay, Edie Kessler, just put your number, what you want to go into. You don't care? Okay.
4.
Ken Shapiro, you want to go into 4. Michael Bellows,
4.
It's hard to see, Gail Golden,
3, please.
this is the old fashioned way. Camille, Fran Abramson. Again, the rooms are Rabbi Siegel, number 1. Here, I'm just gonna assign you at this point. Okay, Clava, you should be seeing a room assignment. Just press accept. I don't know if you can see it on your phone. There we go. Perfect. Joan, what room would you like to go into? They're in breakout rooms. Rabbi Siegel is room 1, Liz Berkey is 2, Dror is 3, and Rabbi Russo is 4. If you can unmute yourself and tell me where you would like to go.
Hi, Joan. Joan, put me in, I don't know, 1, I don't care, 1.
Okay, 1 is Rabbi Siegel. Okay. All right, there you go.
Erica, we're the only ones who left.
I was going to say the same thing, but suddenly everyone appeared.
I thought we were late.
Welcome back, everybody. Apologies to all the people who got cut off in every group.
The mid-sentence.
In every group, there was somebody who was cut off. And I hope this is true in all the rooms. I know in our room we had a very rich conversation, so it's really good to hear everybody's voices and contributions. So we broke the chapter into 4 distinct chunks in order to have some rich conversations, but not identical conversations from room to room. So what we're going to do is invite the clergy who helped to facilitate to share back a little bit about what happened in your room and what you noticed from that experience. So I think let's go in order. Rabbi Siegel, you had the first question about no faith at first sight.
Yeah. Well, I thought we had a remarkable conversation. And when I asked why some people chose this one over the other groups, one person said, because this was the only one I understood, which I thought was honest and probably spoke for a lot of us. Because this idea that, faith at first sight begins to be related to relationship and love, right? We all know what it's like to fall in love and have that love at first sight and suddenly realize that maybe that wasn't it, and how do you fill that in? But the one text that we focused mostly on was the Rambam's text, Maimonides, and this notion that that the heart and the mind must be engaged, not just the heart. But then when we got to the idea that God must occupy the mind constantly, so nothing in the world matters but this love of God, there was real reaction to that, right? What does that mean? And, if we can understand the idea that the heart is not enough, if our faith is based only on emotion, that will not take us through the difficult moments as well. The intellect has to be involved. But if it's only the intellect, then faith will sort of die on the vine, right? As we often say, no one has ever found God in a theology class at university. Right? It just doesn't happen. And so these two ideas must live in the balance. But then there were others that said, wait a minute. You're telling me that my love of God, my faith has to override my love of my children, my love of my family, my love of my husband. How is that possible? How can you do that? And Daniel Hartman was quoted, right? Where Daniel Hartman has written a book that's entitled Put God Second, right? Which is, in a sense, a discussion of orthodoxy in a way. And so that did capture people's attention. But then someone else said, you have to put God in context, right? Context of a given situation, context in the moment. You can't decontextualize God, right? But to kind of see God in that moment for weal or for woe, and that takes a maturity of relationship, right? To understand that and to stay with that. Finally, we heard kind of a very powerful statement at the end, where the conversation was about faith almost feeling like a prism, that God is a prism that we pass through. And so we see the many facets of God, right? But again, that can't just be a feeling, and it can't just be the intellect, but it's this fusion between the two. And so mature faith, like mature love, can't be based on love at first sight, but we can refer back to that moment when we fell in love and embrace it while we're on the journey together. And I think that's kind of where our group ended up. There was much more to say, but I'm going to kind of stop there.
That's beautiful. I love the idea of going back to the moment when we fell in love and finding a way to like live on and recapture that magic. Cantor Berkey, your group was talking about the second section, faith as attachment.
Yeah, first of all, I'm very grateful to my group because I feel like people really were able to sort of open up and share, and I'm very appreciative for the safe space that people felt they had. So that was very nice. But they did resonate with this idea that you said, that faith is demanding, right? It's not just a given for everybody, and it really waxes and wanes, and it's an effort, and we have to, for some people, they have to really work at it. And Gary said something interesting about when you're attached to something, right? It's to something, right? And that thing can let go of you, right? There has to be something there that you are connected to, and you have to feel kind of that energy coming from that. So it's, in some ways, it's a two-way street also with God. And it's through, is it through creation? Cheryl brought in this quote prior to the Shema. Is it through the act of creation that we feel that energy coming towards us, and then it's up to us to come back towards it and towards God through how we live and improve the world. People spoke about what they base their faith on in some ways. For some, it's their own journey with their faith, but for others, it's seeing others who have faith, or a history of those. Jacqueline shared about the faith of those in the Holocaust and how that saw them through the Holocaust. And that's something to build our faith on, is to know of that deep faith at that trying time, and how we can, build up our own faith from that point in history. It was just a wonderful sharing. And, the idea that we came with also at the end with Nikolai was that, yes, it's a journey, and we don't always have to understand everything. That's part of our journey with our faith, and also not to really beat ourselves up about it if we don't understand it, but just to sort of be an acceptance of it. Yeah.
I love that. And I love the opportunity we're having to have this conversation, because I don't know about for others, but I feel like in my youth, certainly, we talked about God maybe as a Torah and like a topic in the Torah, or like the subject of our prayers to which they went, but not really about that sense of journey, and that it's hard and long.
Mm-hmm.
So in my group, we talked about the third section, the idea of the embarrassment of faith. I think we kind of struggled with what that meant, what that title meant, and where the embarrassment is coming from. And there were a couple of different ideas. There was a notion that it's really about the internal struggle, not the external. Really, that as a person of faith, there are those moments when we might question ourselves, was it all worth it? The faith that I've had until this moment, and now I'm suffering, or where is God now in this pain? What happened to me? Have I done something wrong? But then there were some reminders of also the external, and even some vicious and painful Holocaust memories, right? Of being beaten and told, "Where's your God now?" Right, and that really very visceral, literal translation of what Heschel's describing. And we talked quite a bit, and I also am so appreciative of the way that people shared. I think we don't talk about this a lot at the Kiddush table or the like, but we should, right? We all have these journeys and these realities that are part of our lives. But we continue to talk also about a little bit more about the idea of concealment as well, stealing a little bit of the thunder from Rabbi Russo, and the idea of, where is God, the Holocaust in particular, and wondering, I think Laurel even landed us with such a great question, which is, okay, so if this is God according to Heschel, then what's in it for me, right? Because Heschel's description of God is not a God who intervenes, not a God who changes my fate, not a God who makes my life better simply by believing, but rather it sounds painful and hard. So what's in it for me? And we were beginning to think about that notion that the relationship with God according to Heschel is a God who's present with us, feels with us, hurts with us, walks with us, but doesn't solve our problems, right? And trying to figure out how comforting that might be, and also for some, might that not be enough? Rabbi Russo, do you want to share about your group about concealment?
Yeah, I just want to say, even before I get to the pieces, like you just said, Rabbi Chen-Gould, like we often have a lot of nice conversations around Kiddush, which we haven't really been able to have for over a year. And even then, it's like hard when it's really loud to have such like thoughtful, intentional conversations about such deep, heavy topics. So just major thanks to Amy and to Greg and Rabbi Chen-Gould and Rabbi Siegel for this is just such a special space to get to have these conversations. And I love the way that especially Rabbi Siegel, you've had us had this like the rabbi presenting and then these small groups and then these reflections back. It's been really beautiful to have these moments together as a community to have these thoughtful conversations. So just to bring together a few pieces that we talked about in our group. We started with Neil, who talked a lot about what does it mean to see, when thinking about concealment as waiting in this lifelong process, like Rabbi Chen-Gould alluded to. And I remember, Neil, you just said so poignantly, the difficulty is obvious, right? We're looking for it over and over again. We're looking for something to believe in, something to confirm or to support or allow us to have some more faith. And the hard thing about faith is it's irrational because we can't necessarily feel it. Or we can't necessarily obviously find it because it's so concealed. Sherry followed up on that and talked about how Judaism is not a religion necessarily about believing, but it's one about doing. And that by doing, that's what gets us into a place of faith. And I shared back, I'm pretty sure it's Heschel is the scholar who says at one point in one of his books that Judaism is not a religion that's about a leap of faith, but it's about a leap of action. That we do things in Jewish law. We have the law to wake up in the morning and say the Shema, not because every morning we're going to be like, oh, I really want to say the Shema, but because we have the law to say the Shema, that will help inculcate a sense of faith. So Sherry was sharing that the whole point of having Jewish law and pieces of Jewish tradition is to get us to a sense and a deeper sense of faith. Judy shared really eloquently about when we read the Torah, it's nice to read all about our ancestors who had these concrete signs, who had conversations with God, or signs that said like, I'm here, I'm right here with you. And we don't have that. So it's a lot harder today to find those examples and to find those explicit signs. And so what does it mean to have in our world a sort of blind faith that's what we ultimately need? And Judy passed it beautifully off to Arnie, where Arnie right after said that faith at the end of the day is a release of control to something bigger. And something that I picked up on when Arnie said that, I was like, we have so much control just with this little device I have in my hand. I can order something on this thing and sometimes in an hour get it sent to my house. We have so much power. And part of what faith is about is saying like, I'm actually not the all-powerful person that I think I might be, even when I have an iPhone. But actually part of who we are is recognizing that having faith means that there's something beyond us. Dawn talked about how at the end of the day, that power is irrelevant and there's so much going on in daily life. And at the end of the day, what we need to do is recognize that actually, if we want to be able to get through the day, which can be overwhelming and have so much going on in it, that sometimes we just need to have faith. And finally, Sydney said that God is that God is not in this world, going back to one of the earlier quotations, that God is a stranger, that we're the ones who are residing in this world, and God is searching for us, and that what God is actually looking for is for us to be able to have faith. And then Rika was going to say something, and then Amy and Rabbi Cenk and Gould had the audacity to say that we all had to come back to this group. And so I'll just end with the final piece, which is what I love so much about this is that we're constantly yearning for more. And I hope we can continue to have these conversations and keep seeking to yearn to continue these conversations, because they're really helping us dig deep. I'll pass it back to you, Rabbi Cenk and Gould.
Thank you so much. I wanted to conclude even lifting up something Sarah shared in our group, which was that we seem to all mean different things when we say faith. Right? We've been talking for an hour about faith, and yet we all have different definitions of even what we mean by that and what that looks like and how that manifests. And I think that's right. Even though we've read the chapter and looked at a slide presentation and talked about it, we still have these different experiences and understandings. And so I think Heschel, to read Heschel and to talk Heschel, is not meant to resolve our intellectual qualms, but to move our hearts. And my hope is that we can each take a moment of another person we heard or an idea we heard, and to take it internal, and to sit with finding that space of faith within us, whether it's deep or whether it's distant, questioning it, feeling it, creating room to grow it, and maybe even to talk about it with a friend. Thank you, everybody. Erev Tov. Our next class is going to be on, oh, Amy, you told me and I lost the date. What's the date, Amy?
May 20th.
Amy Karp to the rescue. On May 20th will be our next class, with the dialogue, I believe, led by Rabbi Russo. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Rabbi, see you over to the